Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram Antiques Society tasting. Tonight I'm going to have a deeper look at does colour matter, or really, does adding colour matter to Scotch whisky? We think of integrity bottlings being natural colour, non-chill filtered, and 46% ABV and above. But lots of distilleries do add colour, famously Dalmore, which it seems every expression of Dalmore is the same coppery gold colour. Uh, and what does it mean when we add colour, and what does it do to the whisky? I have three samples here, two of which are actually the same whisky, and one of which is a sherry finished version of that same whisky. The two that are the same, we've got one which is the Duncan Taylor Black Bull Kylo blended malt at 50%, and the other is the same whisky but with some colour added. And I'll explain how that happened, because Duncan Taylor don't add colour to the whisky, but they did an experiment. So, adding colour to Scotch whisky, typically through caramel colouring E150A, is primarily done to create a consistent colour across batches and to meet consumer expectations, as many associate darker colours with age and perceived quality. While the industry standard is that caramel colouring is organoleptically inert, meaning it doesn't affect the taste or smell, some individuals with sensitive palates report being able to detect its presence. And we know that also the colour of whisky can also be influenced by the type of wood used for the cask. For example, American versus European oak, and the length of time it spends in the cask. So, what sort of effects would we expect adding colour to have on the nose, the taste, and the finish of whisky? Some would argue that caramel colouring doesn't affect the nose. Others claim it can mask subtle aromas present in the whisky. And on the mouth, the primary argument is that caramel colouring should not alter the taste profile. But some people report tasting a subtle difference, often a slightly bitter or muted flavour. And on the finish, like taste, the finish is generally expected to remain unaffected by caramel. However, some individuals may perceive a subtle difference in the length or intensity of the finish. And of course, there is an impact on our perception visually. The colour of whisky can significantly influence our perception and expectations. A darker colour, especially associated with a specific type of cask like sherry, can lead to assumptions about the whisky's flavour profile even before tasting. And many consumers associate darker colours with older, more complex whiskies, and this expectation can influence their enjoyment of the spirit as well. And in blind tasting, where the visual aspect is removed, the true flavour profile of the whisky is more easily assessed, and the impact of caramel colouring may be less pronounced. So, in conclusion, while the addition of caramel colouring is intended to maintain consistency and meet consumer expectations, it's important to be aware that some individuals may perceive a subtle impact on the nose, taste, and finish of the whisky, and the colour can significantly influence a drinker's perception and expectations, potentially impacting their overall enjoyment of the drink. This is according to whisky blogs and publications. For those of you who don't know, caramel colouring, also known as spirit caramel or E150A, is a food additive. More specifically, it's a food colouring. It's used in everything from chocolate to cough drops. But more importantly, it's used by some distilleries in certain bottlings of whisky. And E150A is the equivalent of airbrushing the whisky. If you want your latest batch of a whisky to look exactly like the last, not a problem. Chuck in some E150A, need your non-age statement to look like it was in a sherry cask and not just stored in a warehouse that had a sherry cask in it. Add colour. And why do we, as whisky connoisseurs, get so unhappy about this? Well, connoisseurs who've been taught that colour doesn't equate to age and quality are unhappy that they can't trust their eyes. It's not just the colour that's the issue, because some claim to be able to taste the E150A in their whisky. And does it have a taste? The name suggests sweetness, but caramel colouring is actually very bitter. Should we care? Well, that's what I want to find out. So I have these 3 samples of Black Bull blended Scotch whisky, one coloured with E150A, one without, and another that had a different finish. It was finished in sherry cask, but no colour added. Black Bull is a deluxe blended Scotch whisky brand by Duncan Taylor. And it's deluxe because along with a non-age statement called Kylo, they also have very old blended whiskies under the label. They have Black Bull 21, 30 and 40-year-old whiskies. So what happened was I take part in Spirit Embassy online tastings, and a couple of years ago they sent us out some Does Age Matter samples where we compared whiskies from the same distillery of different ages. But they also supplied us with 3 Black Bull Kylo blended Scotch whiskies. The first is just as it is, 50% ABV, finished in mostly ex-bourbon with a little ex-sherry. And the second, this one, has the colour added. So you can see there is a difference in colour there. This one has the colour, this one doesn't. So you can see it's darker, the one that's had the colour added. And then the third one this is the normal, and this is the sherry cask finish. And you can see again the sherry cask finished is darker, as we'd expect. And then this is the colour added and the sherry cask, which are both very similar in colour. So what they did was they had probably about 150 people doing these tastings. So they took 6 bottles of 70 cl Black Bull Kylo, and they added colour to that to match as best they could the sherry cask finish. And the amount they used was to get that darker colour from normal to this was actually a pinhead. Sorry about this. So, not a lot of colour added, but will we see any difference? So I'm going to pour a little bit of each whiskey. So this is the no colour added, and this is the colour added. And just to show you, this is the colour added, and this is the sherry cask. So Black Bull Cow is it's a blended Scotch from Duncan Taylor, composed of equal parts malt and grain from the Highlands and Speyside, and it's bottled at 50% ABV. It was born in the 1860s, and it's had a lot of success, especially in the post-prohibition United States. And Duncan Taylor have owned the brand since the 1990s. It features peated and unpeated versions. This is the unpeated, as well as an increasing aging up to 40 years. So this one comes in a black bottle, and which is flanked by a more recent transparent one with a somewhat vintage design. So it's a basic unpeated bottling, reflecting the original recipe with a small proportion of ex-sherry casks. So let's see, this is the naked one. And it's a very fresh and amiable nose. And you get mineral and slightly iodine notes, which intertwine with sweet and fruity ones. Custard, pears, cooked cereals, peach juice, a touch of jasmine, and a sort of apricot yogurty nose. And it's the mineral and cereal part that tends to prevail in length. And it's got quite a simple but aromatic compactness. And the 50% ABV is perfectly integrated. It's got syrupy sweetness and more fruity hints of apples and pears, and a touch of oaky spice. Now let's try the coloured one. And you know what? The coloured one seems to be covered in a blanket. It flattens the nose. And the caramel has definitely taken some of the sweetness off. Quite astonishing. Pinprick in 400 well, 7 times 6 is 42. 420 centilitres, so 4.2 litres. A pinprick. And it definitely has affected the nose. Let's try the sherry one, untainted sherry, compared to the. Well, first of all, we'll compare it to the uncoloured one. And it's got more apples and plums, I think, with the sherry finish. And that's sort of followed by herbs, sherry and pastries. Very light sherry notes with a dry wood smoke. Whereas it's more mineral and cereally without the sherry finish. Herbs, pears, cola cubes, and a sort of oaky aroma. I'm going to try the mouth of the coloured and uncoloured. And there's lots of black pepper, a bit of cinnamon, and it follows quite a bit with the traces of the nose. It loses some of the intensity along the way. And you do get cereals, cooked pear with bits of lemon and lime. It's rather dry. Woody. And there's a vegetal and slightly balsamic element along the way. There's some soft notes of plum, raisins and nuts. And milk chocolate comes through. We'll try the coloured one. It's creamier. And there's a hint of coffee and licorice, which isn't there on the uncoloured one. And it's bitter, almost like dry autumn leaves and stale sherry. It's sweeter, and there's some fruit jam and apricot pie and caramel. We'll try the sherry cask. And it's not as creamy as this one with the caramel added. You get plums with honey, orange pears, oranges and pears, and cola cubes again. It's full bodied with complex on the tongue. Some ripe fruits, plum compote, and dark cherries with dark chocolate nuts and a spicy oak. We'll try the finish. So, non-coloured and coloured. And the uncoloured. It's a very short finish of wood, pear, lemon, cereal. It's rich with vanilla. We'll try the coloured one. It's sickly sweet and it's affected by a more bitter overtone. I'll try the sherry cask. And now I'm getting stewed stone fruits and baked apples, honey, there's a touch of vanilla, and a sort of oaken spice. I'm going to add a drop of water to each of these. I'll add 4 drops of water to each of them. I'll add 5 drops to each of them. So uncoloured and coloured. And now with water I'm getting rancio, sea lion, and definitely the colour takes some of the sweetness away. Try them out. And it's a medium texture, apple chips, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, a sort of trail mix. This is the colour one. And again, it's almost sickly sweet with the colouring, and bitter as well. And it's this caramelly effect. It's much creamier coffee and licorice. And with water, the finish is warming, gentle, and dry. Savoury sweet, very light honey and 5 spice neat glaze. And a generous dose of candied ginger. And again, the finish has that bitterness. We'll try the coloured against the sherry finish. This is a sherry finished one. And with water, with the sherry finished one, I'm getting orchard fruits, milk chocolate, sherried sultanas, and boiled sweet, with a touch of herbal tea in tow. And I prefer the sherry finished uncoloured. On the mouth, the sherry finished. I get stewed stone fruits, baked apples, honey, a touch of vanilla, and a sort of oaken spice. And the sherry cask finish, medium length finish with malty sweetness, spices, oranges and pears. So, what to make of that? Well, what I've found is that E150A did affect the nose, taste, and finish of this black bull. It's a combination of bourbon and sherry cask, but the straightforward one is very weighted towards ex-bourbon, and as such, it's therefore quite a light whiskey. So caramel does change a whiskey's profile, and this was a pinhead in 4.2 litres. It does so with even a small amount. It may help some whiskey to get better, but I think great whiskies might lose a bit of freshness and subtlety. And I think that the main effect isn't to make the whiskey sweeter, but it adds some coffee-ish, sherry-like notes to the spirit. And it brings licorice, and it makes the palate creamier, artificially creamier. So, even at minuscule amounts, I've found that the E150A is sufficient to let me make a subjective, qualitative comparison. This is not evidence-based whiskey tasting, but given the results of this taste test, I'm very much inclined to err on the side of caution, to look out for any distilleries or any bottlings that use E150A and have second thoughts. And even besides that, even if you can't taste E150, it does seem dishonest to colour the whiskey to make it look more appealing. Thank you for listening. See you next time.